Welcome to Keeping It 100, where we have open and honest conversations to make sure you get all the information you need to make better health decisions. I am your host, Dr. Kristen Motley, and we have another good show for you today. As always, during the show, you may think of questions. Please put them in the chat. My friend, Dr. Renee Jones, is here behind the scenes helping with questions. She is my best friend from pharmacy school. She is brilliant, and she's going to make sure all your questions get answered. Now, before we start the show, I just want to mention a few things. I'm pretty sad to report that I had went to YouTube jail last week. CMPradio.net went to YouTube jail last week because it's something that was said on last week's show. Now, they never said what it was, but I'm thinking it has something to do with us talking about microchips being in that thing and how but we said that wasn't true. We had to talk about it to tell y'all that it wasn't true, and I'm thinking their intelligence systems just caught those words in the conversation and was like, bam, we throwing y'all in jail. So I gotta be more careful what we say, how we say it. And if anybody knows anyone at YouTube, can y'all tell them that I'm a good guy? Like, I'm just out here trying to make sure we get good information, the best information that we know of. I'm trying to combat and fight misinformation. The reason that I started this show was because of that, just to make sure that you all heard a different perspective than what you may not be hearing in your friend and family circle. So I'm out here trying to fight misinformation, and they didn't throw me in jail. I don't appreciate that. But anyway, I also wanted to talk about this BA2 variant. This thing is in the streets, and y'all got to be careful. I know that Philly is putting their mask mandate back. They don't have time for their healthcare workers to be overwhelmed, for the hospitals to be overwhelmed with people getting sick. It's just a lot. And so if you started unmasking, I am encouraging you, strongly recommend you start putting your mask on, and not cloth masks. I'm talking about N95s or surgical masks. Now, if you do wear a cloth mask, make sure you put a filter in it, and please wear it right. I be seeing masks hanging below the nose, under the chin, hanging off the ear. You know, your mask should be covering your nose and your mouth all the way. And so get your mask on, and I don't even really wait for the CDC to tell me what to do. This pandemic started over 2 years ago. I've been wearing a mask for over 2 years. I stay masked up. I ain't never stopped wearing a mask because it's still in circulation. I have a 2-year-old at home who has not been vaccinated, and I am just trying to do as much as I can to keep him from getting COVID, to keep us from getting COVID. I eventually got vaccinated, but I still don't want to get COVID. I don't want to have nothing to do with it. So I know it's been a long time, and I know it's a lot, but please keep your mask on. Especially if you're not vaccinated. And if you haven't been vaccinated, I understand. I'm not judging you. I get it. That's, I completely respect that. But please protect yourself and protect your family by at least wearing a mask when you're out, when people are coming into your house. I don't let anybody walk in here without a mask on. I keep masks at the door. I keep sanitizer at the door. When someone comes in here, we all put our mask on. And I mean, that is just how we have had to live. My husband is over me. He is over this. And I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell him, but we still making it. We still married, thank God. But I know I get on his last nerve because I have not let up a bit. Now, I do, if I'm outside, I'm okay without wearing a mask. I know that the transmission is much, much lower when you're outside. So I am okay outside, but inside, I just have zero tolerance for COVID. I don't want to experience it. So I just encourage you all, please wear your mask. You don't have to wait and listen to what the state is doing or the CDC is doing. You just do what you need to do for yourself. We know that masks decrease transmission. So just wear it. Now, let's get into today's show. Last week, I told y'all I would do a show on side effects today. That was my plan. So I reached out to my friend. I have a really good friend who oversees COVID vaccine trials for one of the big drug companies. And so she eats, breathes, lives side effects. She knows it. She doesn't have to do any research because this is what she has to report on every day of her job. So I wanted to bring her on, but she couldn't get approval from her job in time to come on. So we'll have her on later. But I went back through Nolan Fontaine's questions. He's been rocking out with this show every week since we started. He asked really good questions. So we went back, had my intern go through and look at all the questions he's put in through the show. So shout out to Nolan. And I saw he's asked a few questions about the ingredients of the vaccine. So we are going to talk about the vaccine ingredients today. And when we discovered that that was going to be our show topic, I knew exactly who to call for that. I called Dr. Kelechi Lawrence. So, hey, Dr. Kelechi, how are you? Thanks for being here.
Hello, Dr. Motley. My pleasure. How are you? Good to see
I'm
you.
doing good. I'm doing
Very
good. I know it's
well.
been a while since we've seen each other, but I
Yes.
want to give a quick introduction and let everyone know that you are the president of the Delaware Africa Coalition, and you are a highly sought after guest on vaccine, COVID vaccine panels and webinars. Just a little history. We actually worked together and collaborated about a year ago on a COVID panel that I organized for the Chester Board of Health, and you were amazing on that. That was a lot of fun. But professionally, you are a pharmacologist. So a pharmacologist
Yes.
is a person that works in a lab to study and discover new drugs and new vaccines, how they work in the body. And you have, decades of experience in doing that. And you've actually worked on vaccine development for major pharmaceutical companies. So I was like, I knew exactly who to call when this topic came up. So thanks for being there.
It's indeed a pleasure to be here. Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's a delight always to work with you. And congratulations on this show. This
Thanks.
is really good and a major service needed in our community. So you're doing a very good service to the Chester community. And I'm glad to see that. And I'm happy to contribute to that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's get right into it. Now, there was this virus that was a COVID-19 that was discovered, or I guess it first was announced in November or December of 2019.
Yeah.
And so my first question is, this virus came out, it was spreading, it was known to be a respiratory thing. It started in Asia. What did the pharmaceutical companies do? Did they say, "Oh, we hit the jackpot"? Like, what happened once this new virus came out? How do they respond to stuff like that?
Well, generally, what happens though is when you have a new ailment, public health issue, the public health experts, of course, are going to recognize it. And, I think it wasn't until about February of 2020 that the World Health Organization recognized this actually as a pandemic, right? So when something, once you give it a status such as that, which means it's affecting quite a good number of people around the world, then of course the pharmaceutical companies are going to take an interest in that to see, is there anything they can do? Do they already have products that may actually help in treating, the ailment? And if they don't, can they develop one? And that was exactly what they did, because it is actually what they do. So all kinds of ailments that afflicting humanity, the pharmaceutical companies will look at them and say, can we develop a drug, vaccine to help in treating this particular ailment? And that was exactly their reaction for to this pandemic.
Okay, so it came out, and they were like, "What can we do to treat it?" Now, a big thing that concerned me was that it was developed so fast, and so I'm wondering, what well, it was reported to have been developed fast, and it was new, and so for me, I was like, I don't want nothing new. But I'm wondering, how were the companies able to find something so effective so fast?
Well, and that's actually a very good question. And that's one of the major areas of concern for a lot of people because, when you were doing the introduction, you said I'm a pharmacologist, which I am. I'm no longer working in the labs, but on average, it takes about 10 to 15 years to develop a drug or a vaccine, right? And the reason that it takes so long is because you have to be meticulous. to be sure that it is safe and to determine that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. Now, as a pharmacologist, our job basically really is to figure out how the drugs work to help you, right? So you take Tylenol, it cures your headache. How does that happen? That's what a pharmacologist finds out. How does what happens? So the mechanism of drug action basically is what pharmacology is all about. So in this case now, this thing came out in about the spring or so of 2020, and by the fall, we're talking about vaccine. And how come? Is it real? Does it mean they didn't have something in the background waiting, and as soon as this declaration was made, then they brought it out? No, that's not what happened. So here are the reasons why it was so fast. Okay, so a whole bunch of things came together very quickly. Okay, so the mRNA technology for vaccines has actually been around for more than 30 years. Started in the 70s, as a matter of fact, right? 70s, 80s, has been developing, and but the COVID vaccine is the very first successful vaccine developed using that particular technology. Okay, so one thing, the technology was already available, and so it could be used. A lot of the molecular biology techniques that used to take time before are now, taking, like when you're doing PCR, you're doing sequencing or something, you can do that within hours instead of within weeks. Okay, those are some of the things. We're employing technology to help us in figuring out or analyzing data, artificial intelligence as an example. So I think when China published the sequence of the virus, within 2 weeks, Pfizer, BioNTech were able to actually identify the portion that could be coding for the spike protein. Okay, within 2 weeks. All right, and so because we have these kinds of things available to us, the mRNA technology has been around, has already been perfected actually, but it has not been used successfully to develop a vaccine. There have been great developments in molecular biology techniques, such that things no longer took as much time. There is involvement of artificial intelligence that can help us analyze large amounts of data very quickly. So all these things coming together were able to allow the companies to really jump in and begin to really make stuff very quickly. And the other thing I want to point out is that the mRNA technology, why it is actually good, is that it can allow you to scale up production very quickly. Okay, you can switch to something else, and you can also scale up production. So all of these things coming together enabled us then to come up with vaccines very quickly. But the vaccines underwent the regular kinds of trials, screenings, testing to ensure safety and efficacy that any regular vaccine, any drug is going to go through. And I think there are some questions to that effect, but I just want to reassure everybody that the fact that it was fast didn't mean that any corners were cut. It's just that things came together. We were lucky. Let me put it that way. We actually we got lucky. So.
Yeah. So I just want to recap because I'm over here taking notes too. So the mRNA technology has been around for 30 years because what it sounded like when they first, started talking about it was like it was new. And that immediately turned me off. I don't want nothing new. But when I actually did some research, talked to people who I knew and trusted, I found out that it had been around for decades and it, had been studied for a number of other diseases, but it just didn't make sense for those diseases. But for COVID, it made sense and it worked. And so that's a part of the mRNA story. It's not new. It's new for COVID because COVID is new, but it's not a new technology that's being used in vaccines.
Correct.
It had been around. And then another thing you said was that the technology has improved to save time. And so things that would take, say, weeks to perform or to get results is now taking a few hours, and you can get things moving a lot quicker because of that. And then another reason is the artificial intelligence that can take the data, put things together, and give us answers much quicker. And I think it was the artificial intelligence that sent me to YouTube jail because they picked up some words that I said last week. And so artificial intelligence can be
So
good
it
in
can
some
actually
cases,
work
it
against
can
you.
be bad. It sent me to jail last week. But okay, so and then a few other things that I have learned over this learning about this is that the governments and the private industry put a lot of money behind it. So instead of the pharmaceutical companies having to take a risk and not really wanting to take a risk because if it doesn't work, then they don't get paid, they actually got paid anyway. And that helped them to be more willing to take the risk of putting in the time and the research to do the studies. Is
So,
that
so
true?
that's actually an excellent point, and that's part of why things take long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, research is a very expensive undertaking in
Mm-hmm.
general, right? So companies, as they invest their money, they want before they go to the next phase, because as you go from one phase to another, your costs go up exponentially, right? So they want to be sure before they invest that next big pot of money, so to speak. But in this case, also, one of the things that helped to facilitate things a lot was that the government, said, okay, well, we are going to put up the money, okay, for the manufacturing. So you can manufacture at risk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
While you're doing some of your, so a lot of things actually came together, and that was a major component of it, that the government took away the cost component from pharmaceutical companies so that they could then go ahead and manufacture things at risk. And like I said, at the end, everything came together and it worked well. We locked out, but some of those risks were mitigated as a result of government investment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then another thing too is that a lot of the organizations that are competitors, they collaborated. And
Correct.
so because this was such a big deal, so many people were dying. And instead of them holding information and trying to keep it for their own advantage, it was a lot of collaboration happening around the world so that the failures were being picked up quickly, the successes were being picked up quickly, and people could kind of take that information and move along and get us the answers that we needed much, much quicker.
Absolutely. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. So, yep, that was an important component as well. Collaboration as opposed to competition,
Mm-hmm.
which is not generally what happens. But
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic facing us was high enough risk that
Yeah,
people, yes, absolutely.
they were willing to work together, and that does
Correct.
not happen in pharma. That does not happen in pharma.
No, exactly. Well, no, of course not.
It cannot happen. It cannot
You-
happen with these pharmaceutical companies. I know we got some questions in the chat about the monoclonal antibodies. And yes, the monoclonal antibodies have been effective in treating people once they have COVID. And I know that Dr. Jones is going to get on responding to those questions there. So thanks for asking. We'll make sure they get answered. One of the questions that came up is, what is in these vaccines? What's in them? Like, without being too technical, like, what are the components? Like, I know there's a fat layer and there's a something.
Correct.
What's
Correct.
in it?
All right. So, okay. So, as we know, the spike protein is what the virus uses to attach to your cell and eventually get in, right? And so, what the vaccines are doing is causing the body to make antibodies against the spike protein. Okay. And so, what the vaccines really have, the active ingredient in the vaccine is just one thing: mRNA. The M stands for messenger RNA. All right. And the messenger RNA codes for the spike protein. Okay. And so, and because messenger RNA is usually very unstable, right? You need to, first of all, keep it in solution to begin with. And you need to stabilize it with some of these components. You mentioned fat. So it's got some, lipids in there to keep it dissolved and in solution, like polyethylene glycol and things of that nature, phosphocholine, those things are there. And you also have salts, right? Like sodium chloride, trisodium citrate dehydrate. These things will help to stabilize the mRNA component. But these things don't do anything else. And in fact, you find them in a lot of the drugs and food items that we consume on a regular basis. So they were just there to help to stabilize. Other things that you may also find is acetic acid, sugars like sucrose, or buffers, right? To again help. All of these things are helping to stabilize that one active ingredient, which is the messenger mRNA that codes for the spike protein. And once it gets into your body, your cells within will translate that into the spike protein, and then secrete the protein. And once your immune cells see that, they'll start making antibodies to it. Okay, so it is actually those antibodies that are made to the spike protein that eventually will coat the spike protein, preventing it from attaching to your cell and then getting in. That's really how the vaccine works. Okay, so in terms of components of the vaccine, it's just one thing: the messenger RNA, and everything else in there, whether it be fat, salt, or buffers, are there just to stabilize it. And they're not doing any extraneous work, if you will.
Okay, so just to recap, we have the buffers that are there for like protection. We have the fats, the salts, it sounds like, and some sugars, and they don't do anything in terms uh of helping your body respond. What those things do together is they preserve the mRNA, like they keep it so that it doesn't dissolve or it doesn't disintegrate. It helps it stay active so that
Correct.
when the messenger RNA gets into your body, it tells your body to make these proteins that your body will recognize and build and start to create its own antibodies, so that you have the antibodies built up, and when you're exposed to COVID, you're already protected against the disease because you already have the antibodies there.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. So Renee is not able to put the response to the questions about the monoclonal antibodies in the chat, but she popped it here in our private chat. So I'm going to read what she said. Monoclonal antibodies have reduced the risk of death and hospitalizations. However, new data actually caused FDA to remove the authorization of one of those types for emergency use for Omicron BA2 because it wasn't as effective. So as these new variants come about, we'll see that the treatments may work or they may not work. And if they're not working anymore, then we need to stop using them. And so there are other monoclonal antibodies that can be used in its place and that will be used as long as they're effective against that variant. But again, the monoclonal antibodies are not used for prevention. They're used once you are infected, you're given that as a treatment. And what is ideal is that you prevent the infection, or you prevent even getting sick from it. And the vaccines have been shown to work really well at doing that. If you don't want to get vaccinated, I get it, I understand. But there are some other treatment options that are coming down the line, including the use of antivirals too. So that is the update on
Yeah,
monoclonal.
that is correct, and that is good that we have these other options. But it is also very important for people to realize that even for the antivirals, you have a time frame within 5 days of being infected, right? So you have
That's
to
true.
take them in order for that to be effective. And so many of us, by the time we realize that we've been infected, it's already been more than 5 days, right? And so depending on how your body is going to react to it. So I don't think it would be a good idea for somebody to say, well, I'm not just going to get vaccinated. I'm not going to worry about it because there are all these other options that I have. I can be treated with a monoclonal antibody, or I can get the antiviral. But those only are effective provided you are caught on time.
Yeah, that's
Otherwise, they're
true.
not.
That's
Yeah.
true. And for me, the other thing that works in favor of the vaccines is that billions of people have been vaccinated. Billions of people have been vaccinated. So many more people that have been recipients of the antivirals and of the monoclonal antibodies. So if I'm looking at what's going to give me the best chance, what has the most information available, I would bet on the vaccines. They were given starting over a year ago now. Billions of people have it. Typically, with vaccines, if it's going to be a problem, it'll show up in about 2 months. It's not going to be something that comes down 5, 10, 20 years from now where you're where problems are popping up. It happens quickly. And so billions of people have been vaccinated well over 2 months ago. The risks that are associated with the vaccines are extremely, extremely rare. I would go with a vaccine for protection as opposed to taking a chance of getting COVID and getting so sick that I have to go to the hospital and then having to take a monoclonal antibody or an antiviral who may have been used in a couple thousand people. You don't have as much research on the adverse effects. You just don't have as much information. It's there, but it's not as much compared to the vaccines. I like that the vaccines have been given to so many people that I just find comfort in it. I don't know.
Yeah. No, in fact, that point bears repeating actually, because yeah, you're right. The average drug or the average vaccine, after you do the clinical trials, which is usually done in a selected group, screened group of people, and then when you go out into the real world, so to speak, once it gets approved, that's when you begin to find whatever issues that you couldn't have been able to see in your in the clinical trials. And the reason for that is because, first of all, now you are treating more people, right? More people are using it, so any chances of any adverse effect will show up the larger the number of people using it. So in the case of the COVID vaccine, in fact, that's one of the things. It was everywhere. And before you know it, millions and now billions of people have now been given the vaccine, so that any adverse events are likely to show up, right? Because so many people have taken it. And so far, the ones that we're going to have adverse events about, as people are concerned about, we've seen them. But the Moderna, your Pfizer's, and so on and so forth, even for the Johnson and Johnson, we've seen that there may be some cardiovascular component in some vulnerability in some people. But beyond that, everything else is fine. And yeah, because so many people have gotten them, and so far people are not falling over and dying from the vaccines. Um, that ought to give somebody some confidence.
By far, not even close.
Yeah.
Like, not even close. Now, there are some side effects of the vaccines because you're not going to get away from not having side effects of anything. So that's true, Nolan. I hear you. I see you, bro. And I'm going to give you that side effect show. I just got to get my friend to get approved to come on and talk about it. So don't worry. But yes, you're right. There are side effects. But when you're looking at it and comparing, and we're going to do a show on that. I think we're going to call this the Nolan Fontaine Show because he just always give me ideas. What we're going to do is we're going to compare the side effects of the COVID vaccines to the monoclonal antibodies or something like that. So we can just see, like, toe to toe, who is winning out here in this side effect game. But I wanted to go to Nolan's questions from last week. He asked about graphene oxide, and I didn't know anything about that compound, so I looked it up myself. And so I wanted to ask you about your experience, Dr. Kelechi. What is graphene oxide, or is it a component of the vaccine at all?
Absolutely
Any of the
not.
3 vaccines?
No, it's not in the Moderna, Pfizer, or in the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. There's no graphene oxide there. No.
Where did that come from?
Well, there are a lot of conspiracy theories, right? People are just throwing out things and see whatever sticks. Does it have latex in it? No, it doesn't have latex. Does it have pork products, mercury, whatever, eggs, so all kinds of ideas that are coming up. And that's what is happening, and it's real for a lot of people. In fact, it is very real for a whole lot of people. So the misinformation that is out there is real. But
Yeah.
I can tell you that none of the three vaccines that are commonly used in the United States have graphene oxide in them.
Okay. And I think
They
that
also
that's
don't have microchip. They also don't have microchips in them.
don't say
You
that
know,
word on
e-
this show.
even even the smallest microchip can still not be made small enough to fit in a vaccine to be injected into people.
True. It's true.
So
But yet
it doesn't. But there are a lot of people who believe that they do. So
yeah, it's very true. And it speaks to, so thanks for confirming that it's not a part of any of the vaccines, and for sharing that it's just something that a person made up. And we talked about that for the last two shows. We've been talking about looking at information online, how to know if it's real, and really understanding that people can make up anything. They do. They have made up all types of lies to keep people misinformed, confused, and afraid, and concerned. And it's just hard. It's hard to pick the real from the fake. But we talked about using websites from places that that you trust, that you looked into yourself. So when Nolan put in the chat today, I saw he put in the chat some information about the monoclonal antibodies, and it looks like it came from a .gov, and we talked about that. So thanks, Nolan, for using a reputable source.
yes.
So that's important, because pulling information from anywhere, I'm not going to read it. If I don't trust it, if I don't know who wrote it, if I don't know where it's coming from, I'm just not going to put it in my head, because I don't need to do that. So being very careful about what you read and what you take in. And I'm not saying to avoid reading all types of stuff, because you need to know what people are saying and what's happening. But I'm just saying, be cautious of what you take to believe is true, and make your health decisions based on false information is very risky. And so you can read it, but that doesn't mean you have to believe it. You should be questioning it, and you should be questioning everything that I say too. So
Correct.
be asking those questions. Don't just take anything for face value, but you have to be cautious of what you are putting in your head to believe is true, because then you're spreading it, and then you're not making the best decision for yourself either. But
And so that's the danger that we are all facing now, right? So we are at a stage where information is everywhere, right? And information is at your fingertips. You just got to type in your phone, right? And it comes out.
yeah,
So information is available to everybody, just virtually, right? Everybody. And so the danger, therefore, is the misuse of that information could actually be detrimental. So it places the onus on you as a consumer of the information, what you do with it. And before you can do anything useful with whatever information, you have to have a basic understanding of its usefulness or its utility, the source where it's coming from. So are you going to do work? Yes, absolutely. So you can't just go to the internet and say, okay, well, I saw it on the internet in black and white. Just because it's in black and white doesn't mean it is credible. And there are a lot of people who are making a lot of money just spewing things out that don't make sense, knowing that there are vulnerable people, gullible people who are going to take the information and believe it.
yep, yep,
And when what you believe is putting your own life to a detriment, then I think you need to be a little more cautious.
yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a good way to wrap up this show for today. Um, I have more questions to ask you, so I'm not sure if you're available next week or not, but I'd love to have
I,
you.
I am I am absolutely available whenever we can look at it, as long as my schedule permits. I think what you're doing is wonderful, and we should all cooperate and collaborate in providing useful information to help our people, to help our people in society really make the right decisions. So certainly, let me know when you have another opportunity to come in and help explain any of the questions that people are asking and all that. I'll be glad to do that.
Awesome. All right. So next week, same time, same place. Now, in the meantime, if y'all have any questions about the COVID vaccines, y'all can always call or text me at 267-322-0470. Again, 267-322-0470. Just call or text me. I'm always glad to answer your questions. Until we meet again, Nolan, we're going to holler at you next week and get through the rest of these questions. And we're going to do a side effects show as soon as my friend get approved to come on and talk. But y'all have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so very much. And keep up the good work.
Oh, thanks. Bye.